So welcome back. So soon the end of the semester. We have covered a lot on relational tables, the relational algebra, the relational model, SQL, optimizations like indices, transactions, and so on and so on. So the ecosystem also around SQL. Now, this part is a little bit special because it's not going to be about tables, it's going to be about cubes. And cubes are another shape of data that is different from tables. So I'm going to spend time over it, also trying to do it in a data-independent way. But then I will show you that in spite of the cubes being something different, you can actually implement cubes on top of tables. So you can actually use a good old relational database like PostgreSQL and make cubes work on top of it. So this is a very good example of such mapping between data shapes. This actually came later. So if you look at a bit of history, you know that data independence dates back to which year? 1970, exactly. So 1970 is data independence, so the relational databases and the first implementations. And that was the age of transactions, in the sense that people just started to build systems. Of course, we didn't have websites until the 1990s, but in the 70s and 80s, it was just systems, database systems that would process the data. And it was transaction heavy. It means that in these systems, you have a lot of data that gets inserted and deleted and updated and so on. Of course, you also have queries that are just reading the data, but you really have to imagine that there's a lot of updates in these systems, and they're really, 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 really good at it, right? I showed you how with serialization, serializability of schedules and so on, you can even allow many people to use the same system, millions of people communicating with the same database at the same time, in such a way that they all have the feeling they're the only ones using the system. So it's really doing it well. And then in the 1990s, in the middle of the 1990s, there was a new hype that is related to business intelligence. And here we are talking about how we can use that data that is stored and constantly updating in all of these systems. How can we use that data in order to do fancy dashboards and nice looking reports for the C-level executives of the company, right? So all the decision-making process. So this is business intelligence. How do we exploit all of that data to get these charts? And then a bit later in the 2000s came the age of big data. So this is when we started having MapReduce, Spark, Hadoop, and so on and so on. That is not part of this course, right? But now I'm going to tell you a little bit about this age of business intelligence. And data cubes are, of course, the central component in there. So the first thing I'm going to do, and that might be even one of the last things I do today, is throw these two acronyms at you, OLTP and OLAP. Does anybody know what they mean? Has anybody seen them anywhere? Who sees that for the first time? Okay, most of you. So they're scary, but they're actually not so scary. So let me first tell you what they mean. This means online transaction processing, and this means online analytical processing. They look scary, but they're really not. OLTP is in fact what we've been doing since the beginning of the semester. It's this idea of having a relational database management system like PostgreSQL, and you have plenty of queries that read data, that insert data, that delete data, that update data. This is OLTP, right? So you read and write to the data in real time and in a lot of quantities. OLAP, this is what's now new. OLAP is when you don't modify the data, you freeze it, and you just analyze it. This is why it's online analytical processing. And when you analyze the data and you don't touch it, you don't attempt to modify it, then there's a lot of things that become more efficient and more practical. So these are these two worlds, right? OLTP and OLAP. And so I have a few slides that basically contrast them a little bit and tell you the difference. So one example is that OLTP is used for record keeping. Record keeping of what? The inventory of your web shop, still Digitech Galaxus, right? All the products you have to keep it up to date. The inventory, how much quantity you have of each product, the prices, and so on. Record keeping of your customer database. You need to know who your customers are, their names, their addresses, their cities, and you have to modify them. The customers might move, they might modify their address, and so on. Your employees, the orders that customers place, and so on. So this is the record keeping. This is, in fact, what makes your company work day to day, right? So an OLTP system, PostgreSQL, is the database system on which your business is running on a day-to-day basis. On the other hand, on the right, OLAP is when you have all the CEO, CFO, and so on that are gathering and making these big strategic decisions about the company. And then, of course, we are not talking about the day-to-day business anymore. We're really talking about this, trying to look back at the previous 10 years and how is the return on investment evolving and so on, and then making these big decisions. And for this, you don't need to modify anything. You just need some snapshots of the data. You just have the data, and then you analyze it and build these fancy reports on top of that. So this is decision support. That's really for the C-level executives to make decisions. And I insist, and I'm again repeating myself, but it never hurts to repeat myself. In OLTP, because that's the day-to-day business, you have a lot of rights. You have the customers placing orders, you have your inventories going down or going up if you get a delivery, the customers updating their addresses and so on. But in OLAP, it's a lot of reads because again, you just try to prepare a fancy report for the CEO, right? So this is one of the contrasts. That's going to be the last slide. So what it means is that when you look at OLTP, what you deal with are single records. You look at one customer, or a customer is looking at one product, right? So it's very, very fine grained. You really look at individual records. But in OLAP, these kind of reports, they are not focused on a single customer or on a single product. They are the company-wide data of all of the sales worldwide, aggregated by country and so on. So this is all summarized and consolidated, right? Who sees that contrast between the two? Very good. So I'm going to stop here today. Then I will take it from there next week. And then I will introduce you to the beautiful data cubes, what they look like and what we can do with them. So thank you very much. And I'll see you next week.